I am Dr. Elisa Fuentes Montemayor. I'm a senior lecturer in applied ecology based at the University of Stirling in Scotland. I'm a former board member of Bats Without Borders. I am currently one of their scientific advisors, and I am going to be your host for today's webinar. Before we start, I would just like to remind you that you can follow us on social media and find out more about our upcoming webinars and other events via our webpage. We are also on Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, and LinkedIn. And you can also catch up on any of our previous webinars, which you may have missed, by going to our YouTube channel. Okay, so I'm delighted to welcome Santiago Perea as today's speaker. Santiago is a postdoc at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. He is also part of the Sound Forest Lab, where they use sounds made by animals to investigate how tropical forests can remain safe and sound. He describes himself as a mix of a conservation biologist and a data enthusiast driven by curiosity about how human-driven changes affect wildlife populations across multiple spatial and temporal scales. His research combines methodologies such as bioacoustics and camera trapping with advanced analytical and AI-driven approaches to study population dynamics and biodiversity responses to forest management and human disturbances. And today he's going to be talking to us about bioacoustics as biodiversity evidence. So I'm really looking forward to your talk today, Santiago. So
yeah, thank you.
Over to you now.
Okay. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Elisa. And sorry about my voice. So I lost my voice 2 days ago. So of course, the day I have to give a talk, something happens. But yeah, thank you very much for inviting me to give a talk today. So I try to give examples of bats, but it's gonna be more like a broad bioacoustics talk about the evidence, strength, uncertainties, and then I'm gonna give it a global application point as well. But starting from the beginning, what is bioacoustics? And I see bioacoustics are these 3 acoustic domains. We have the biophony, that's the sound produced by the organism. Then we have the geophony, it's all the environmental and geophysical sounds. Here we can consider the rain, the wind, and other factors. And then because we are in 2026, so we have to think about this, the anthropophony, the human generated sounds. All of the things that you can imagine that makes is all the sounds, no noise, all the sounds emitted by humans, those are in this category, anthropophony. And then there are like 3 sub-disciplines, or the main ones, although I'm saying 3, but you're gonna see that probably there are more, there are 4. The first one is bioacoustics. That is the animal or the organism sound production for communication and echolocation. And I'm gonna use this term because when you're working in bioacoustics or in acoustic monitoring, sometimes it's hard because they're like a different sub-disciplines, but we need to use one word, right? So for me, I'm gonna use bioacoustics as a general term. Then we have ecoacoustics and the soundscape ecology. That's why I said 3 or more, because these 2 are very similar to each other, because it's more about the organism, the environment, the landscape, interactions through the sound. And then we have the conservation bioacoustics. It's the acoustic inference for conservation and management. Okay, what is bioacoustics? I think we introduced it in a slide, but what about why? Why bioacoustics? Why do we want to use bioacoustics? So bioacoustics offers different things. One is continuous. We can get standardized, minimally invasive monitoring across broad spatial and temporal scales. We can record at day, at night. We can leave the recorders for a whole year. Also, it works where traditional methods fail. Thinking about bats at night, in the middle of nowhere, underwater, in remote or dangerous terrains. Also, we can collect petabytes and more here in 2026 and 2020. We can collect a lot of data at continental scales, and regional scales. Whatever scale that you are thinking about, we can collect data. Sorry, because of noise. And then we can leave the recorders for months or years, and we can get a lot of data. And then We can use it for any sound, producing taxon or soundscape, even the soil, but as well for threats like gunshots, like chainsaws, as we are going to see later. If you are interested to know more about the advantages of challenges of bioacoustics, I fully recommend reading this paper in 2021, where they're like highlighting all the different advantages, like the multiple taxon groups, this temporal scale, the spatial scale, also linking with functional traits, the same as the challenge, like in between and within a species variation, how the signal propagate can affect the way that we are recording the sound. Also, the power and the storage, because right now it's very easy to collect data, but there is a big challenge, right? How do we store that data? How do we deal with the processing that data? And then there are other non-target sounds that we need to consider, all these geophony and anthropophony sounds. And because I had the opportunity to talk about bioacoustics, so I'm going to start with a little bit of the history, and I see the maturation into the field in four different periods, from Darwin and all the theory in the sexual selection that drives the vocalization evolution, to the first researchers that started using bioacoustics to understand the animals. In this case, Saunders with he linked territorial with reproductive behavior, and then Brand, he used all of these very old and very heavy field recording equipment. Then in the mid-century, the military speech and music technology was readapted for the ecological research. And I think a great example is the naval sonar that was extended to the aquatic ecology. A little bit later in the 80s, 90s, so we had this boom of the digital revolution, and then we started seeing all these compact, lighter recorders. We start recording the ultrasounds, important for the bats, improving the battery life and the storage capacity. I think here we can say that around this age was the beginning of the passive acoustic monitoring. And now, because we are in 2026, I think the world is completely different. So we are in this big data and artificial intelligence time, thinking about the AI, the cloud computing, and all these affordable audio modes, for example, that they're transforming the passive acoustic monitoring into a big biodiversity data science that a lot of people now can use and can start thinking about how to answer all the real world questions. But also, there was a moment, there was this cultural fifth wave, and this idea of the sound as a conservation argument. And I'm going to give you all some examples, starting with Rachel Carson and the Silent Spring. I think this idea of a silent forest is a dead forest. I think that was a great argument as a conservation for the conservation. Then in the 70s, we have all these movements for the whales. We have the songs of the whale, and then this paper in Science was the beginning of this commercial whaling moratorium to save the whales in the 70s. And then I think for me it's very important to highlight Bernie Murray Suffer, because right now, 2026, we are working with artificial intelligence, machine learning. We are training models, classifiers, but where are all these sounds, all these libraries? So Murray Suffer in this book, he was already asking about all these questions that we are right now dealing with, like where were the museums of disappearing sounds? And right now, we are also dealing with that. So where are those recordings that we need to train the models, also to understand, to train ourselves to verify those models? And then a little bit later, the term of biophony, which is great, which is very important because it's the collective acoustic signature of a habitat, all the animal sounds. And now we are in 2020, 26. Again, I'm saying this many times. I know that. Sorry about that. We're in this moment of opportunities and responsibilities, because bioacoustics is a big biodiversity data science at continental and global scales. We can record months to years of high resolution audio in whatever we want, actually, in the middle of a cloud forest in Peru, to the Congo Basin, or even in the deep of the ocean. And then this data is standardized, and we can reanalyze all these data sets. I like to say that there is this this saying that 1 mile of a spectrogram for each 24 hours of sound, which sounds, for me, sounds crazy. And then we have all these global projects like the Australian Acoustic Observatory, we have the North American Bat Monitoring Program, we have the Soundscape Baseline Project. So right now we are using the acoustics at a different scale. However, all of these opportunities come with responsibilities, and they are like open questions that we need to consider. How do we manage, store, and process the acoustic data? It's kind of it's easier to record the soundscape, right? But then we need to deal with that. How do we store all these miles of acoustic, all these kilometers of acoustic data? Then we need libraries and acoustic data validation. So we cannot just say here there is an animal. No, we need to prove that the animal is there. We need to learn. We need to train ourselves and the models with libraries and acoustic data. Then there is this environmental cost of artificial intelligence processing. I think it was a couple of years ago, everyone was using a ChatGPT to create pictures, right? And I remember that people were saying about the environmental cost of creating those pictures. So we need to consider that as well. And then there is this privacy concern, the risk of paratrue science, and also the AI and the who owns the data, depending on where we record the sound. Because with camera trapping, at the end we are taking pictures of people, so it's kind of like a more straightforward. But here we should consider as well: are we recording people's lives? So we should consider those when we are using bioacoustics. And then, because I was thinking about, okay, I want to give like a global application of bioacoustics. And I think right now, all these climate agenda, the global conservation, the policy anchors are demanding biodiversity metrics that we can verify. So as saying here, as conservation efforts globalize, more actors, larger investments, and bigger claims on evidence of biodiversity, the impact must be verifiable, comparable, and scalable. And I think bioacoustics is not a needs research tool anymore. I think right now we can answer, we can help with all of these global diversity targets or goals. And I'm going to give like 3 different examples. This one is the first one, is the Camden Montreal GBF, that they need, actually, it explicitly says that better technology for global biodiversity reporting explicitly recognized. So they need to recognize this better technology for global biodiversity. And this, the Camden GBF, they have these targets for 2030. And later I'm going to give some examples, but bioacoustics can help to address all of these targets. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, well, a bunch of them. So I think we can use bioacoustics to deal with these targets. And then also nature-based solutions, they need to demonstrate, they have this idea of no net harm to biodiversity that requires knowing what biodiversity is there. And I think acoustics is good for that. And then biodiversity credits, just to give a third example. Evidence must be, I try to, with this word hard, but this is still a challenge for me. So now we need to, the vindicable is not a formal standard. It's a formal standard, not a preference. Sorry about that. So in this talk, I'm going to try to answer 3 questions, but all of them are kind of like together. But the plan is, first, where has bioacoustics been used in conservation and what has it achieved? So the plan is to map applications across the full conservation cycle, from threat detection to impact evaluation. Then, how strong is the evidence that bioacoustics produces? Because, okay, yeah, we can see application, but how strong is that evidence comparing to other methods? We are going to review evidence types, present absence, abundance, diversity metrics, but also the uncertainties that shape each of those. And then, when is bioacoustics the right tool? and when is it not. So this is kind of like it's going to be embedded in the previous one, but yeah, we are going to try to answer these three questions. So starting with the applications in conservation, the way that I see this is like from identifying the problems to evaluating effectiveness. So we have identifying the problems. So bioacoustics can be used in some situations. Then setting the goals and prioritize. We go third to design and implement solution, and then evaluating the effectiveness. And the way that I'm going to present this application in conservation, we are going to go one by one. For example, identifying the problems. Bioacoustics is being used to detecting threats through sounds. Blast fishing, chainsaw sounds that was in Cameroon, I think. Then illicit cattle ranching in Pantanal, Brazil, and then gunshots from poaching or hunting. We are using the sound to detect all of these threats. And here, for example, if we talk about the gunshots, there are like many studies looking at the wildlife elephant conflicts by looking at the gunshots. Then another, in identifying the problems, we can also use bioacoustics to detect invasive species. And here we have a few examples in both also in between, in the terrestrial, but also the marine, the aquatic ecosystems. We have examples for Lithobates, the American bullfrog in Spain and Portugal. We have Rhinella marina in Australia is used for early warnings, these acoustic signatures that Rhinella produce. Then we have problems or issues between different owls, like a Strix varia, we detect a Strix varia to remove them in areas where they're like I'm gonna say that they're in the same habitat as the Strix occidentalis. And then we can also have examples in islands, like in Puerto Rico, using passive acoustic monitoring. So Ribeiro and collaborators identify 16 vertebrate species, and then as well to detect and track invasive fish species like leonfish in the Caribbean, also in the Mediterranean. There are like a good amount of examples. And then for pest outbreaks, so I think if you are interested in knowing more about the insects and how all the applications for pest outbreaks, I think you should read this review, because they actually, it's a very well written review, and I think I really like the way that they're like giving different examples in insects. Then the second is setting the goals and prioritize. And I think it is very important that bioacoustic, I think this is something because the application is not, there are like some aspects or some situations where bioacoustic is going to be the best option, and in others, it's not probably the best option. So it depends on the context and the situation. And in this case, I'm going to say the bioacoustic is good for local and regional to prioritize at the regional and local scale, but it's not that good yet at the global scale. And I'm going to give it again, this is the idea, I'm going to give some examples. So bioacoustic is being used for habitat in koalas. It's being also used for restoration for forest resilience under climate change. And then also to reveal like an ancestral forest is different from a national park. So this whole idea of the intact forest landscape to protect what remains on these intact forests. And then in the marine, a little bit the same. So there are also examples using to spatial use informing shipping route planning in dugongs, or the coastal planning, the coastal spatial planning, turbines and different species. There are like a few examples of this. So acoustics can be used in many different situations. And then the third one, about design and implementing the solutions. So this whole idea about broadcasting intact soundscapes to attract species to restoration sites. I'm going to say that in marine, there are more examples, but in terrestrial system is still theoretical. However, we have an example, and it's here in the Amazon. Well, there in the Amazon, it was used to simulate the different chorus of a song of frogs. But then in the marine, this idea of active intervention through sound is being more commonly used for coral restoration mostly. And then again, this third stage is a little bit more niche. We have this idea of the deterrence and adaptive management. Deterrence have been used for bats, wind turbines. They're a great example of use of audio playback to deter elephants from crops. And then in China, we have this example of using the sound to deter, for this cruise necropolis. It's a special concern, and there is this human-wildlife conflict in agriculture fields. But we also have examples, again, in the marine ecosystems. We have with seals, with whales. So it's been used in different scenarios. And then probably the most common application is in evaluating effectiveness. And we have multiple examples. Acoustic diversity compared before and after forest restoration in many different parts of the world. We have like this soil ecoacoustic study that they were recording the soil, and they found the acoustic index values were higher in restored soils in the UK. Passive acoustic monitoring as an auditing tool, all these FSC certifications. And there are also examples about translocation success using bioacoustics, like here in New Zealand. And the same in the marine ecosystems. There are examples that they're comparing the seagrass transplant in Italy, that they have like a higher pressure than unrestored seabed. And then with the coral reefs, soundscapes closer to healthy reefs, evaluating this effectiveness of different interventions. So then looking at this whole conservation cycle, we have from identifying, I gave examples about threat detection, invasive species. It's almost close to near real-time monitoring, thinking about Australia. The prioritize is good at a scale or regional level. We're not still there at a global scale. About implementing, it's niche, but it's growing. Right now, there are more and more examples about acoustic deterrence, enrichment, real-time adaptive management. And what I think bioacoustics is being most commonly used with great success is in terms of evaluating restoration, certification, biodiversity credit verification. So now that we have an idea of different examples in the whole biodiversity cycle, how strong is the acoustic evidence? So we compare with other methods, how strong is for us to use bioacoustics and its evidence? And I think it's very important to remember that passive acoustic monitoring produced this data that we can go back and reanalyze. It's an evidence that we can store, and is less prone to manipulation than expert in-person surveys. But then when we think about evidentiary strength, I think it's important to remember that depends on what is being measured, how some are identified, and the errors accumulate along the way. And with this, I think it's important to have in mind that most uncertainty stems not from the field, but from the sound identification process. And here, what you can see is like a different, so it's kind of like a lot of words, I know, but basically when we record the sounds, they're like a different situations where all these uncertainty can be found. So, for example, in the sound source, there are like many species that they're cryptic. Maybe they're like a new vocalizations or dialects. The vocal behavior change in response to disturbance. So maybe the way that we are recording is affected by this sound source. The sound propagation as well, depending on where you are. So we are gonna record the sound with a higher or lower quality. The signal recording, depending on the microphone that we have, the sensitivity, if it's a very old recorder, those things are going to influence the way that we can analyze the acoustics. But then there are like ways to fix that and ways to deal with that, as you can see here. But then there are some situations in the field, and then we have some situations, as I mentioned before, that they're more about the identification process, like by humans, the way that there's this human error, but also the ID error by machines, like a false positives, false negatives, having a good library or reference library or not. And all those things, so we need to consider those things when we are like working with bioacoustics. And now the way that there are different types of acoustic evidence and their strength. So it depends on or the kind of data that we are using. And there are like three main evidence types. Each of these has like a different strengths and uncertainties, and I'm going to talk about them a little bit. The first one is the species present absence. I think the evidence is strong, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Then we go to the abundance and population trends, and the diversity and community composition. Those are the three main evidence types that we have when we use acoustics. Starting with the species present and absence is probably the simplest one and perhaps the most common form of evidence. There are like many papers using present absence data, but they have a challenge. So how do we know that the recorded sound is actually from the species that we are looking at? And for that, the sound libraries, all these reference libraries, like this topic that people in the 70s were already talking about. All of these sound libraries are essential, but right now we don't have like many large creative libraries. So this is still a challenge. But then, anyways, so talking about evidence, present absence with occupancy modeling accounting for imperfect detection and then having a good sound libraries, I think the evidence strength is strong. And then we can also confirm that the species is not there. And here there is an example in Tanzania where they were looking at differences between camera trapping and acoustic data, and they found that the chimpanzee absence was way faster using acoustic data than camera trapping. Then the second one. So, okay, presence absence data is good. Sorry again about my voice. Now we move to the second one, abundance and population trends. I fully recommend if you are interested in getting in learning more about this second evidence type to read this paper integrating AI models in the ecological research workflows, the case of terrestrial bioacoustics by Justin Kitzes. And then they talk about 5 different approaches to counter what you cannot see. We have, and all of them have like pros and cons. So depending on your research questions or the way that you are applying bioacoustics, you should consider one or another one. If you are using abundance or if you want to look at an abundance or population trends. First, we have the detection, non-detection. We have this time to detection abundance from detection patterns, the Royal-Nichols. We have distance samplings. I'm not going to talk about one by one in depth because I think this review is very good. So, and they describe each of them very well. But yeah, we have detection, non-detection. We have distance sampling. We have this vocalization cue rate, this idea of vocal activity rate. I think in bats, people have used these ones before. So more individuals assumed to mean more calls. And then we have other different two different approaches. We have the acoustic localization and then the individual identification. Basically, different. It's like us. I'm speaking English or trying, but yeah. So the thing is like a different sound features identify and count individual acoustic fingerprinting. So we can identify the individuals, and with that we can try to estimate abundance and population trends. However, as I mentioned before, each of these has like limitations that we should consider. For example, going back to individual identification to the last one, there are like a few benchmark data sets. So it's very difficult to identify all the individuals for all the species in the world. I think when you're like working with acoustics, you should consider all of these limitations as well. But at the end, the central challenge in this for this type of evidence is like distinguishing whether multiple occurrences of a sound are from one or many individuals, and converting sound counts into individual counts is the real challenge. How do we know is one individual or many individuals? How do we know that it's one species or is one individual from one species and not the individual for a different species? That is very cryptic. All these things are challenges, and we are still there. So I think we are getting better, but with the artificial intelligence and acoustic recordings, but we are still there. So I think this is something that we definitely need to consider. And then the third evidence, the diversity and the community composition. I think this is the hardest question. Who is in the soundscape? Calculating diversity metrics. So this requires identification of all, or at least like a representative sample of all the community, right? And this is very hard in practice. And there are like a different ways to go through, and this called what I call the proxies for biodiversity. We can identify the presence of focal species, and then we extrapolate. We can use a subset of species. Or we can do machine learning based embeddings or acoustic indices. However, the strength of this evidence is kind of weak comparing to the others. The species richness using acoustic as a direct proxy, or looking at the community composition in very hyper diverse systems, there's a challenge. There are not many papers. Well, I don't know if there is a paper identifying all the species community in a hyper diverse system like a tropical forest right now. And with this, I want to mention this ongoing debate in using acoustic indices that is happening right now in the bioacoustic community. It is whether acoustic indices should be abandoned in favor of AI-driven species identification or not. Because of this idea, they're using acoustic indices as direct proxy. I'm going to leave it here for now. So now we go to the section 4, is the summary. First, we're talking about the applications from passive listening to active conservation tools. I think right now we have an idea that we can identify threats. We can use bioacoustics to identify threats like detect problems, like invasive species or human activities, that we can use it to prioritize. And it's better at the landscape scale or regional scale. At the global scale, we're not still there. Then we can implement bioacoustics, but this is still a niche, but growing. We have all these acoustic deterrents, the enrichment in coral ecosystems, and also all this real-time adaptive management. And then to evaluate effectiveness. So, and this is where it's most common use. We have restoration, certification, and biodiversity credit verifications. Then about the evidence strength, what the evidence can and cannot claim. And I think here, let's start with this about whereas the error could accumulate in the field. The most uncertainty stems from the sound identification process. It's not like we are recording maybe the microphone or anything. It's more about how do we identify that sound. And then we have, as I mentioned, we have different types of evidence. we have the present absence and the absence confirmation. I think the evidence is strong. Then we go to abundance is harder, right? Because at the end, so we need to make sure that we identify the individuals, individuals from individuals. But I think the strength is kind of strong. And then when we go to the diversity, here things are harder because how do we know all the species or the community in a soundscape, right? But we have this species richness and community composition. I think the bioacoustics evidence is weaker comparing to the others. And I don't want to stop this talk without talking about the acoustic indices and this debate because I have an opinion. I think everyone in the bioacoustic has an opinion. And I think from my point of view, I think we have to recalibrate this role. We don't need to, I don't think we have, or we should abandon this tool. I think in conservation biology, I think integrating methodologies is the way to go. But in this case, okay, acoustic indices, they are not reliable as direct proxies for species richness. Okay, in mega diverse ecosystems, it's very hard to even know what the species are there. So how can we rely on a proxy, on a direct proxy? We cannot even know the species that they are there. But then I think they are good for initial evaluations of large soundscape datasets for both the quality check and to direct further investigations. And then I think they provide like a valuable evidence for conservation. Like remember these examples of looking at before and after treatment or restoration plan. I think we can, they can indicate whether vocalization in biodiversity is present at the site and whether the soundscape itself is changing over time and space. I think acoustic indices are proving to be useful in those situations. And then we can more detailed species level analysis can then refine and support appropriate conservation tools. So I see this debate as okay, let's integrate and use it when we need it and when it can be useful. And then just to finish with my talk, I think I want to talk about the soundscape libraries and systematics. I think right now this is the biggest challenge when we are working training classifiers using artificial intelligence to help us identify or process the data. These created peer review sound libraries remain a bottleneck. And I think this cartoon it's explaining by itself because you can, if we have a garbage data, we are going to have a horrible output. And I think we still need ecological and natural history field recordings because we need to have like a good quality to get a good quality output. Because right now the artificial intelligence cannot improve faster than the training data because at the end it's using the data that we are providing. And with this, so thank you very much. And I want to finish with this. Like soundscapes are not just data products. They are expressions of the ecological communities shaped by the evolutionary history, the environmental conditions, and human influence.
Thank you, Santiago. That was an excellent presentation and a really informative summary of all of the benefits and also challenges of bioacoustics and ecoacoustics and the applications they can have for conservation. I'm just checking if there's any questions in the chat. Not yet, but please do type them in if you have any questions for Santiago. I am going to start with one question that I have myself while other people are typing in the questions. And it's about that final quote that you had there on your slide about soundscapes being expressions of ecological communities. And I'm just thinking about, particularly in terms of their application for measuring the effectiveness of conservation or restoration actions. And for example, measuring how soundscapes change through time.
Mhm.
But then the challenge of interpreting that and making sense of what that change
Mhm.
means for ecological communities. So I just wonder if you have any
Yes.
thoughts on that.
I think first, so comparing what with what, right? Because I think that's why we need all this, having talked about all this baseline, this idea of having this reference baseline so that we know that that's the, I want to say, the impact of the high quality soundscape. And then from there, so if we have this baseline, we can know if this restore is working or not working because I don't know if you know what I mean. So basically, so I'm saying, so having these reference sites, we can compare with our museum or with our reference. We can compare if something um, is getting better or worse. I don't know if the question goes in that direction.
Yeah, so I think that's easier when you
Yeah.
have what species you'd like to see in your site if you're
Yeah.
restoring a
True.
site, for
Mhm.
example. But when you're thinking about ecoacoustics and acoustic
Yeah.
indices, I know there's some sort of assumed relationship between what particular indices are supposed to be related to, but I just wonder
Yeah.
if if is that is that enough just in terms of thinking I'd like that particular index to be going up and that other index to be going down because
Oof, yeah, that's a good question. So I don't know if I have an answer for that. um, yeah. Enough in terms of enough.
I'll rephrase my question. And I'm not expecting an answer. I just wanted to hear your thoughts on the challenges of interpreting them. Um,
And it is a challenge for sure there. Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So I just wonder if how how cautious we have to be when interpreting acoustic indices. I guess that's
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, so that's a good question. It's going to in the middle of the current debate. Yeah, I think we need to be cautious and we need to know when and how to use it. So I don't think we can say, okay, this uh, landscape is mega diverse just by looking at the soundscape saturation, for example. But I think in that aspect we should be cautious about using acoustic indices. But also, I think it's very useful when we are looking at how an ecosystem is doing before and after, because then we have like a direct comparison between what that ecosystem, that specific site was before and after. I think it's very good at these site-specific situations.
yeah.
I don't know about like comparing a tropical forest with a different tropical forest in two different times. I don't think. I think these indices are site-specific and
Yeah.
time-specific in this aspect.
Yeah. No, really good point. Yeah, agree. Okay, we have a question in the chat about so it says acoustic monitoring has been used or is being used around the world. Could we talk about countries, continents, regions, or can we really talk about species or conservation problems or cases around the world? So it's asking about where the focus has been so far.
Um,
Because I guess you gave lots of examples from sort
Yeah,
of
I
global
guess
examples.
so. Yeah, I think there are examples at different levels, right? And for different goals. So has been used. Yes, yeah, I think acoustic monitoring is yes has been used around the world, and there are like areas that is being used more frequently than others. For example, if you want to go to a species level and you are in a rainforest in Gabon, it's harder because we are not there yet. But if you are in the US and let's talk about bats. So you are in southeastern United States. We know that we have 15, 15 to 20 species. So we can identify those species at the species level. And then, yeah, so we can we can go to a species level inference. But then if you are in the middle of a rainforest, how do we know that the species, how can we answer questions at the species level if we don't know the community or the species or richness that we have in the area? So it's being used, but it's not being used in the same way in the different parts of the world, because there are like some challenges that we need to address first, because it's not the same being in southeastern United States than if you are in the Amazon.
Yeah, and also the importance of having good reference libraries, as you also
Yeah,
mentioned.
yeah, that's a nightmare.
Yeah, lots of work to do on that.
Yes,
front.
yes, but that's good. That's good. I think, but I think we are in the good direction.
I was also wondering about, it was really great to see that you talked about the strength of evidence for the different things that you can measure with sounds, so species presence or abundance indices or diversity or composition. And I just wonder if you could say anything about, so presumably you were sort of referring to using automated approaches to process the data and classify sounds. But I just wonder if you could say anything about the role of sort of human verification of those automated pipelines of
Yeah.
sound classification and the role
Well, I think
that plays with quality control.
the manual verification is key right now. So I think I think right now everyone that is using automatic classifiers like a BirdNet, so you have to verify at least a subsample of recordings before saying that the species or that file is from that species. Yeah, I think right now manual identification is key at any point for any ecosystem and at any level.
Yeah, and I guess it's also different challenges so if you're really interested in detecting a particular species, a target species, it's presumably relatively straightforward compared to if you want to get a more accurate proxy for abundance, for example, where presumably the manual verification
Yeah,
would need
and
to
then we
be.
go with the false positives and false negatives. So how accurate is the identification of this species versus a different one? Are we talking about birds? Are we talking about bats? Are we talking about frogs? Yeah, so I think we are at different levels.
Great. There's a question about prioritization on species we can't pick up without special recording devices. That's a question from Roxanne. I'm not sure if you want to expand on that question.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if there is a I don't know if there is a specific prioritization on a species. I don't know. I guess it depends on where and what taxa are you working with, right? Or
Yeah, I'm not sure if Roxanne wants to say a bit more about specifically what she means by species we can't pick up with special recording devices.
because so spatial recording devices. So we are talking about that frequency that we humans can hear.
Yeah, because I would
Yes.
be thinking about bats, for example, where you
Yeah.
need like, ultrasonic microphones to
Yeah.
record.
Or if you go whales or or even elephants, because right now, so you can also measure the infrasounds that elephants make.
Yeah, and I guess on that front, so when you're talking about, or as far as I know, in terms of acoustic indices, they're usually most of them, if not all of them, sort of working within a certain
Yeah,
frequency band, which
frequency.
is
Yes.
relatively narrow. Thinking about bats, for example, they're not included in those indices.
Yeah.
So is there any, scope? I realize that's a really challenging area to develop, but is there any work being done on that front?
I think I read I think I read a few studies increasing the frequency. Yeah, but the problem is also the storage all that amount of data, right? Acoustic data. I think we can do it, but the problem is I think right now there are microphones that they are recording in the full spectrum, but I don't know. I think there are limitations for each technique and methodology. The same with camera traps, CDNA. I think that's why I said a little bit about integrating. I didn't talk about that, but I guess depending on your research question, you should consider one or the other one, or integrating if you have the budget and the time and opportunity. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's been a few papers trying to expand the frequency in acoustic indices. Mhm.
That will
I
be
always think about that. Yeah.
a really exciting development, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Any more questions for Santiago? Lots of comments in the chat saying thank you and great talk.
Yeah.
So we do have a little bit.
Yeah, sorry everyone for my voice. So I was struggling a little bit.
Yeah. I'm glad you didn't have to stop.
Yeah, and then
halfway.
and then I didn't realize about those words that I didn't know to even say. I was like, oh my goodness, what's going on today?
We knew what you meant.
Yeah.
Okay, there's final comments saying acoustic monitoring is very helpful for biodiversity monitoring across different land uses. However, identifying species, especially bats in tropical regions, is quite challenging due to high levels of background noise from other sounds.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
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 it is. Yeah, so
as you say, lots of potential applications and scope for application.
Mm-hmm.
Also,
yeah, and also the way that bats. So bats communicate as well, but when they echolocate, the collocation is not communication. It's not like right now us that we're speaking English to transmit to understand each other. When they're using the ecolocation, they are doing to navigate in the dark and find prey, right? So it's a different it's a different purpose. So I think so you can see more overlapping between species when they are ecolocating, because at the end they are doing for a different reason. They are not doing like us, that we are speaking English to communicate a point. So you are going to see more overlapping between species.
Yes. So lots of work.
And the environment and the landscape, the vegetation, the whole forest. If it's an interior forest or it's about the canopy, those things change the way that we record and the quality of the recording.
Yeah, so just sort of reiterates the importance of taking all of that into account when we're interpreting what the sounds are telling us.
Yes.
Okay, I think we're going to leave it there because it's almost 2:00. Well, where I am. So I'll just like to thank you once again, Santi, for a really exciting talk. And I think people enjoyed it as well. And thank you for sharing all of your experience and research with us. And thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today. And we hope that you will continue to join us in future webinars as well.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a good day. Bye.
Have a good day.